So welcome everyone to the Royal Oak Historical Association. It is my great pleasure today to announce that our guest speaker is Mr. Gordie Alberg, who has many ties to this area, as well as other areas, but many ties to the Royal Oak and surrounding areas. And it is with great pleasure that we welcome him here today to tell us about his family and his personal life. Come on up, Gordie. Thanks.
Anyway, we were at the farm in Alberta. My granddad, on my mom's side, had a sawmill back there, and my dad was bush foreman. And they had about 5 quarters of land. They logged with horses and grew their own hay and green for the horses. So the reason I'm going back there is because my mom has so told the stories of me when I was hell on wheels.
Move the microphone closer.
Better now? Yeah, I was hell on wheels, according to her, and just a few of the little things that were happening. I was three years old in April when we arrived in Victoria. But before that, and before we had left the farm, I had managed to watch my dad turn the key and push the starter on the tractor. So when he came in for lunch, he heard it start, and I was out there, and I turned the switch and pushed the button. And I rolled off the back, and it hit the brooder house and rolled over. And the next one, I was hollering outside. My mom come out. She couldn't find me. She was looking around, and I was 30 feet up the wind charger, but couldn't get down. And she had this harness that she used to put on when we went to Edmonton to shop. And she said I was gone the minute she turned around. So she got into Eaton's store in Edmonton. She left her car at these Passmore's garage, good friends. And she just turned around in the store. I was gone before she got the harness on. So she was outside right away, and yes, I had got out on the street. And my mom and dad, I wasn't born until they were in their 40s. So they were old people by that time to me. So this guy come walking up the street hand in hand with me, and this your boy? She says, oh yes. Yeah, he said he was lost, and I asked him what his mother looked like, and he said, she's a big fat old lady with a black dress. So that didn't go over very well. So she gets back to Passmore's garage, and she said, Bill, next time they came there, Bill said, leave me here with me in the garage. Oh no, she says, you don't want that. No, he said, leave him here. So when she got back, she said, how was he, Bill? He said, he was a treat. He says, anywhere I went, he followed me. If I pick up a bolt, he'd pick up out. When he got on the creeper and rolled under the car, I rolled under the car. So from then on, I was at Passmore's garage. So then my granddad and my dad came out to the coast here. First, they looked at Chilliwack to buy a farm. And Dad said, let's go over and see what this Victoria is like. So that's where we ended up. 1516 Mount Douglas Crossroad. After they sold the farm and come out here, Grandpa and him, he bought a house and all the buildings, 2,500 chickens, 2 milk cows. What was it, $3,700. I know he told me he had bought a new tractor and a new 2-ton grain truck before the war. And after the war, in 45, he had the auction just before he came out here, and he got double the money for his truck and tractor because you couldn't buy anything for about 2 years afterwards. Yeah, and it was a great life as a kid. Stayed pretty close to our neighborhood, and what are they asking now? I went to Cedar Hill Elementary, Lansdowne Junior High, and Mount Doug. Activities as a child, no paper routes, but I was a Boy Scout and I had piano lessons for 5 years, and also played the trombone in junior high. Hobbies, there was no, it started with cars, probably as soon as I could crawl. But when I was about 6 or 7 years old, I started building racing bugs. And my dad was not mechanical, so it was a 2x12 plank with 2x4 axles and steering with your feet on it. And I took all the wheels off everything I had, my wagon, my push cart, any wheels that I could find. And the last set of wheels that I could see were on my mom's baby carriage in the basement. So I took the wheels off the baby carriage on, and I used to go down the hill on Mount Doug and then turn on the brake foot and spin it in the gravel. So I put the baby carriage wheels on and went down there and turned it, the all four just went flat. My mom was screaming, "Where are the wheels off the baby carriage?" So I stayed pretty close to around the Mount Doug area when I was a kid with Ted Cameron and Jimmy Kiddo, and I know there was about 4 houses or 5 houses on Mount Doug Crossroad at that time, no street lights. And my mom came out a year or a month after my dad had come out here and bought the place. And he picked her up on the CPR ferry at midnight. I don't know whether you ever remember that the midnight ferry used to come in, and we drive out to home and drive in the yard. My mom says, "Eric, what did you buy? We're out in the bush here," he said. Come straight off the farm. So the next morning when she got up, she didn't think it was too bad. We had a cook stove, we had a hot water tank with the pipes running from the boiler running through the cook stove, and a wood stove in the basement, no telephone. And being that I was born on a farm, and the way the farmers were back there in the 30s or 40s, if you were working by the time you were 8 or 10 years old, and my dad made sure of that. I worked with him many, many days, and with people he did work with. He was a logger when he came out here and worked for Dick Oldfield and Frank Doyle. It was Oldfield and Doyle Logging then. And he was also got his ticket as a stump blaster. So everywhere he went, like from the time I was 6 or 8 years old, I was hoeing garden and working, and I worked for John Pendry when I was 12 years old, milking cows. And when Dad would go on these work trips, I always went with him when I was younger. He was a great friend of George McMorrin's. So he would go out there. George was rebuilding a bunch of old cabins in the back where the auto court was. And Dad and him were under there crawling in the dirt and putting footings in that was only about 18 inches off the ground. And George was loud, and my dad was louder. And by the time the middle of the afternoon was going, you'd hear them two voices wind up, and they'd start hollering and shouting at each other. Next thing George would say, "Okay, Eric, that's enough. Let's go down and have ice cream." So they'd go down and sit on the stools and have ice cream and then go back to work. And I polished the dance floor, the old maple floor in McMorrin's dance hall, and got to know a lot of the kids out there, Brian Andrews and Franny and Jenny Ward and Kenny Catterall, Miles Primrose. And when I was growing up, a neighbor on Mount Doug Crossroad moved out to Brookley Road, Terry Tribe. So then I ended up, when I had a license, I was coming out and met at the Tasty Freeze with Harvey Sherman and just all the, I can't mention all the names because we all basically know them all. And then when I'd always wanted to be a machinist from the time I seen, what a lathe or a milling machine was like. So I served my apprenticeship at United Engineering. Started in 1960, and I worked there until 67. So I was 68. I was 3 years as a journeyman. And then I quit and bought a brand new Corvette, and I worked from San Diego, California to the Northwest Territories. I'd work for 6 months or a year and then just move on. And when I come back, I had a couple of different jobs, and then I went to work up at the observatory as a machinist instrument maker for 6 or 7 years. And then my old boss from United Engineering come and says, you got to come back to work for me and take the place over. So that's what I ended up doing, and very much enjoyed my years there, owning it for about 20 years. And the cars, I've been cars all my life. It's my passion. Not many other hobbies. Played a little bit of hockey. What have I missed in here? Beaver Lake, Elk Lake, yeah. And we probably all, we used to come out to the bright spot out here on the highway by Elk Lake, and then later on in years, everybody got going to town to the white spot, drive around Yates Street, and then back up to the white spot. Well, they wanted to know about first girlfriend, my high school girlfriend. I got engaged to her when we graduated, and when I got into race cars, it didn't suit very well with her, so I kind of left her and went with the race cars. Then I had, yeah. And I've been married 3 times. My mother was just an amazing lady. She lived to 105, so, and when she passed away, all her vitals were fine. I used to go in and see her. From 101 years old, she was in a home. So we would, the siblings, by the way, I've got an older sister and a younger brother. And I used to go in one day to see her, and my sister went in the odd day and seen her. And it was the best 5 years that I ever spent with her. So by this time, I had been married 3 times, and I was having an awful time with the last one. And she was coming and going. And I was in there. My mom was over 100 at this time, and she said, "Is she gone again?" And I said, "Yeah." And she said, Gordon. She said, "What's the matter?" She says, "You're a good-looking guy." And she said, "You're smart. You're a good businessman." But she said, "When it comes to women, you're dumb." So. Yeah, and she lived on that farm from 1945 to, when did she go off it? When she was 101, so it was basically was there for 75 years. And now, 10 years before my dad passed away, he sold the cows we had and everything on the place, and all he done was garden. And the month after he died, my mom went out and bought 5 registered Black Angus cattle. And she had her calf crop every year. Everything was on the calendar. The people would file by in cars and stop. This is in the middle of, pretty residential area. and it was just a little picture-perfect place. And so she fed those cattle until she was 100 years old and 6 months. And I used to worry like crazy. I'd go over. And, you know, in the winter in the mud to go up there, it was quite a ways up to the barn. And she'd go up there and back and forth. And I thought those cattle must have known. She gets in between them, you know, and I thought they'd knock her over. But no, she didn't. I know one time I went up there and it was just mud everywhere, and I had taken planks or siding out of the hay shed and had the hay inside and put a manger inside so she could just put the hay into the manger and the cattle were there. So I didn't, she wasn't at the house, so I go up to the barn, nobody there, the cattle are feeding, so I go back down again. Nope. I go back up again, and the little knob on the door was turned open. So I open it, and she's in there sitting on a bale of hay in front of the manger with her cane in her hand. And just as I was going to say something, she went bop. She bops one of the calves on the nose. I said, "What are you doing?" "Oh," she said, "all those big beggars are trying to get most of it." So she said, "I just sort them out by giving them a little bop on the nose." And Frank Doyle and my dad were best friends, and he bought 36 acres alongside Frank Doyle's place. So when we were kids, my mom hoed strawberries up there, or Dad hoed strawberries, and Mom picked strawberries. So spent many, many days up there. And Albert McCarthy, too, we used to go there. I'm mixing things up, and I don't know whether I'm getting everything out that should be here. My favorite teacher was Mr. Warder in grade 6. And I had a fabulous year, and it was probably the only year that I'd done anything in school. And he was an amazing teacher. Dickie Munn and I won the softball award that year. I was on the debate team, and we won that. And every other year, I just didn't pay attention to teachers. This guy was just an amazing teacher. And any people that I'm not mentioned names, I mean, I knew so many out in this area, Royal Oak and Cordova Bay. Some of them I can't remember their names, and that's from age. It's not from. So, yeah, well, my dumbest moment, I was trying to figure out what that was. Like, it was cars, machinery from so I was driving by the time I was 11 years old. I was working on the farm, even haying and plowing. But I can remember I was maybe 7 or 8 years old, and I went into Mom, and I said, "Can I go out and back the car out of the garage for you?" And she said, "What? No." I went immediately out to the garage and got in the car, and I couldn't really reach the pedals either, but I knew how to get it into neutral. And it had a little bit of an incline into the garage. So I give it a little push, jumped in, and it started moving backwards. I got the side of the car out of the garage and turned it hard to go out and just wipe the whole side of the car out. And then Dad said to me, he said, "We better teach you how." So then from then on, I turned that car around every day when Mom was going to town. I had to get out in that garage and start it up and turn it around. And I don't know whether I got anything. I should go through where I worked. The first real job I had was at Cedar Hill SO, and that put $2 a week in my car for gas. And still in high school, and then I got my apprenticeship as a machinist at United, and then I done that traveling jobs for 7 or 8 years, and then I worked up at the observatory for 7 or 8 years, and then back to United Engineering, and that's where I retired from. So hope it fills a little bit out of what I'd done in my lifetime. It was a blessing. I've enjoyed my whole life. Some of it I'm not too proud of, but you go through that. In my 20s, I got a little bit haywire. Yeah, that's about it, everybody. Sure.
So you mentioned in Alberta that you were at Passmore's gas station. Is he related to the Passmore that we know out here?
Bruce Passmore, no.
No?
No. And I'm
Just
not,
asking for the race crowd.
I don't hear real good now, so you have to speak up.
Hold the microphone to your mouth.
Yeah, I'm not used to speaking into these either. You have to speak up because I'm hard of hearing now.
Does anybody have questions from the floor?
Yeah. Do you have a car collection? Do you have a lot of cars?
Yes.
Do you have a lot of cars? You said you were.
Yeah, too many. Yeah, I actually had 20. I had a little warehouse downtown, but I sold it, and then I sold about 4 or 5 of them, and I got 4 or 5 in storage, and I got 12 or 13 at home.
Any particular make or model?
Yeah, a couple of Corvettes, a lot of mid-60s muscle cars. You guys wouldn't recognize it probably, but a Dodge swept-side pickup that I'm just restoring now. And I had a Cameo pickup that was a kind of a dressed-up 57 Chev pickup. And then I landscape my whole yard. It's 2 acres, and I don't do anything in a small way when I do it. So I had a gravel truck and an excavator, and I re-landscaped the whole place and put a deep pond in and put irrigation in everywhere. I dug a well 430 feet deep. I used to do work for them. They come and drilled the well for me, and I said, I'm going to drill a well here. I said, where would you suggest? And he says, we don't suggest. You got to suggest. So I said, put it there. So they started drilling at 100 feet. They had 5 or between 5 and 6 gallons. And my pond, it goes down about 18 inches in the summer, in the late August when the water table goes down. It's spring fed, but I wanted it up level with the flowers at the top. So I said, you got to keep, drill. So they drilled, and a couple of times they asked, and when they were at 380 feet, he says, what are you going to do? And I said, keep drilling. And he just burst out laughing. He says, most people we ask, they say, go another 20 feet. So it wasn't an hour later, and he came into the house. He said, you better come down here. At 436 feet, it hit an underground artesian river, and it shot up higher than the drill mast on the. So I said, I got my water that I want. So I irrigated the whole place. It float switch in the pond, and it fills the pond up. So, but I played with the cars long enough until I had the plates of a rat's nest. There was piles of rock in the back because, like I said, I didn't do it small. The boulders were half the size of this table, and they rip-wrapped the pond, and I terraced it and rip-wrapped it with, 3,500-pound rock. with rock and alpine plants in between all the rocks. So this will be the first summer. I actually done all that work last summer. Never stopped. Yeah, and I raced cars basically on and off all my life. Built engines, built race cars. Just had a really good life. I heard Roy was in the back there.
Been out to Western Speedway. You were highly involved at Western Speedway. I remember when my dad and I were running out there, you were out there and around. And I think you were a part of Billy Foster in some ways too.
He was
around with him.
a great friend of mine, yeah. Just miss him so bad. Roy, when Roy started his first race, it was up in Nanaimo, and he had this nice looking black 50 Ford. And I got talking to him before he got into the feature, and I said, Roy, hang the wheel on the curb on this track, and I said, don't leave it. And he was on the pole, and he ran all the way around, and he won that race, the first race that he had ever been in. You remember that, Roy?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
Like I said, with
And his dad was a great,
Speedway, I'm not trying to get away from this area here, but I think Western Speedway was a part of this area. Everybody in this race, probably here in this room, has been to or heard about it. And,
yeah.
like I said, it was an honor that you were part of it, and I'm glad I've been a part of it. And good to hear you talk today.
Yeah, and Roy's dad, Jimmy, was a good friend of mine too, and a very good friend of Billy's. I know, and like I said, I had my years that were a little wild there for a while. Jimmy, Reg Midgley, and myself, they had the used car dealership, Billy and your dad, and Reg Midgley, and they're going back to Edmonton to pick up 5 cars from an auction or something. So I drove the station wagon back with all the people in it. We get to Hope, and Jimmy says, let's pull in here and get some beer. So we got 2 cases of beer, and I didn't want to take that trip because I was leaving with Billy for Phoenix and Salt Lake City on Wednesday, and we went on a Sunday night. So I drove all the way back there, drove all the way back and never slept, and just got back in time to leave with Billy. And he had a brand new Ford station wagon from Glenelg Ford with the fancy paneled one and a 428 in it, and we had a mattress in the back, and we used to sleep on the mattress, and then every second night we'd get a motel and have a shower. The next night and then when we drove, one would drive, but I think I slept halfway to Salt Lake City because I had any sleep. Yeah, and my shop at home, it's a great congregation. There's 2 or 3 guys that come all the time, and the first thing we do is go and sit in the shop and not do anything. There's 4 stools there. Everybody sits on stools and tells stories. And one of them was old Dave Cooper, and it's only about a year ago was the last time that he was there. Yeah. And I don't know whether you guys remember Ray Pottinger, Roy sure does. But we were all, where were we one day at, I think a racing lunch or something, and they all wanted to come back to the warehouse and look at the race cars. So everybody was in single cars, and everybody arrived, and there's a petition on one side of the shop, and we're all in there, and we're waiting for Ray to come along. And Ray is 80 then, and there's a midget there, and so never come. And I had heard the door open, so I looked around the corner. Here he is in the midget. He come in there in the door, never come around and seen us, got himself right in the midget. He was... Yeah. Any more questions or... And the Cunninghams, I can't forget them. Oh, I got a story for the Cunninghams. We had a 41 Ford when we came out here. And he had bought the car, the truck, and the tractor all in 41 before the war. And then sold it, but he kept the Ford car when we came out here. And that's when the highway went out through behind the highway now, and you know where Cunningham's old log building was. Dad pulls in there, and I mean, I'm just 3 or 4, and Chuck comes out and he cranks up 10 gallons. Chuck pumps 10 gallons up into the glass tube and funnel it down in there slowly. And Gladys comes out and she's got her hat on and her uniform and everything. And Chuck walks up and says, "Eric, you still got an Alberta license plate on this car." "Oh, yeah. Well, we don't need that on there anymore." And he took that off. So thank you very much for the opportunity to speak, and glad to see some of the people that I grew up with here. Some of them, you know, and I know them, and then some of them I've even forgotten names. I'm bad at that now. But even Ozark, I worked with him at Cedar Hill SO. Yeah, and I'm fumbling around trying to find names and faces and put them together.
Yeah, he let me have his Corvette, he let me drive his Corvette and he could get on it, and I went sideways down the road and then I got stuck. I sort of backed off and it straightened out. That was the last time I drove it.
Thank you very much.
So anyways, we've made quite a few friendships throughout our time, 13 years we've been going now. And it's always nice to have some of them come back. And Jarrett and I have stayed in touch ever since he first came. And a lot of us went for a walk with Jarrett. And he also is the author of many books about John Dean Park. So I think you're quite amazing, and I think everybody else does too. But I feel like you're part of our family because we've done so much with you and we've seen you so many times. And we want to continue this, by the way. But just recently, Jarrett phoned me and said, "Guess what?" And I said, "What?" And he said, "I just got an email from Elizabeth May. And she said, 'Congratulations, Jarrett Teague. You are the recipient of King Charles III Coronation Medal.'" And I'm going to let Jarrett tell you what happened after that. But please welcome Jarrett Teague to our floor.
Well, hi everybody. My name is Jarrett, and thanks for having me back. I'm with today a high school teacher, Don Spencer, and a dear friend of mine, Susan, the president of the Saanich Pioneer Society. So thank you especially for you two coming today. I have to apologize in advance if I tear up because talking about yourself at my age to people a few decades older is not easy. Don't want to ever appear braggadocious or come across as one of those people, but I've been invited to talk about a 35-year volunteer effort and how the Government of Canada, through our MP Elizabeth May, recognized that. But first, just before anyone goes home, if anyone doesn't have this book, please take one as a gift. Okay, I'll put them over here. On the front cover is the mountain, Mount Newton, known as Claywilnook. And when you have a close look at this image, it's 1952, before the Pat Bay Highway went through Sydney. And you'll see up here the Sacred Mountain, and that's the mountain that we know as John Dean Park, but the place is known as Place of Refuge Escape. And I'm pretty sure you guys have heard the legend of the Great Flood, but we'd like to hear it again? Yes. Okay. So you have the word escape. I escaped danger. Refuge, I took refuge. So escape and refuge are two different words, and together they have a meaning. And that is Place of Refuge Escape, known as Claywilnook. So you could say Mount Newton, Claywilnook, or Refuge Escape, and they're all the same. So 8,000 years ago, up the Fraser Valley was a massive glacier dam. And it was a wall of ice that held up the entire province, full of water, and this thing got soft, and it went, woof! And it created everything that you know today as the Lower Mainland. And the first shock wave came plummeting down and pushed the ocean floor and marine sediment up and created Sydney and the airport, and the waters rose. And half the people died. Half the people made their way to the summit of the mountain in their canoes, and they tied their ropes, cedar bark ropes, to arbutus trees. And the water was rising right up. So they very quickly reorganized into one long rope, and they tied onto this rope, and it went down to an arbutus tree, and the water was right over the top of this entire area. And British Columbia, the whole area was just flooding right down and right up. Everyone was traumatized, and early in the morning, before the sun rose, Raven flew around with a little stick in its mouth, a little stick, and it landed on the bow of the largest canoe, and it seemed to be telling them something. Quasatich! And they looked, and they could see that the waters were receding and the land emerging. And this is the name Saanich, Quasanich. And they got out of the summit for a rest, and they looked around. And this is Mount Newton in central Saanich. And they looked around this area, and they said, this area will be known as Quasanich, the emerging land. And we will be the Quasanich people, the emerging people, the survivors of this flood. And this mountain which saved our lives will be known as Claywilnook, the place of refuge escape. Hi. So that's the legend of the Great Flood and the origin name of the word Quasanich, and the name Claywilnook, the place of refuge escape. And that's the ancient history of the place. And sure enough, Hereditary Chief Eric Pelkey, the Hereditary Chief of Sayut, was there, and he told the story of the Great Flood at the beginning of the ceremony. And he did a really awesome personal job of telling it, coming from him. And it was very cool for me to sit there in a room of about 75 people listening to him. And Elizabeth May stood right here looking up at this great man, telling that beautiful story. Well, I'm sorry I'm breaking up in front of you, but it's from the heart. So I'll change topics so I no longer tear up. But it was a beautiful ceremony. I found out a month ahead of time. I received an email from Elizabeth May, and what happened was there are medals that the Government of Canada issues. In 1992, there was the Canada 125 medal. Then Queen Elizabeth had her 50th and her 60th Jubilee. So to give you an idea, the 60th Jubilee Medal was awarded to 60,000 Canadians. And it went out to organizations who then determined their own internal criteria, and then they went out from there. This time around, the King Charles Coronation Medal went to 30,000 Canadians. And the current Governor General of Canada took it on as her personal project. She created a criteria, significant contribution to Canada or region. And Elizabeth further talked about it that every MP in Canada was offered 25. to award, and she said not everybody took the challenge. Interesting. What a shame when you think about it. I'm sitting there thinking, wow. So anyway, so Elizabeth May, in her wonderful personality, went further on to say that it was an opportunity for government, or the people actually, to graciously say thank you. And the people that received it, for a wide variety of reasons, people who donated money or volunteer hours or leadership in the community, it was a wide variety of people. But it was a really cool ceremony, and it was such an honor that I actually drove out of Butcher Gardens. It was at Butcher Gardens in the old residence. And I drove out of there speechless. Just didn't know what to say. But anyway, I gotta stop tearing up here. But I am speaking from the heart.
We recognize that.
And thank you for allowing me to come here and just be honest and say thank you, because we have a system, a constitutional monarchy. Every once in a while, there's these medals that the government can give out to thank people. And I don't even know if I necessarily deserve it, but they figured out that, 35 years, up to 20,000 hours, and the result is the entire mountain is invasive-free, garbage-free, erosion-free, trail systems are sorted out, they're not widening. The whole park is in an amazing condition. And I can't stand here and say, oh yeah, I did this, but that is the result. And just when you think that it's not noticed, it is. So further reading on the medal is that I become a role model. And I asked a very successful gentleman in my life, I said, what is a role model? And I know what a role model is, and you know what a role model is. And this gentleman said that we are all role models in our own way. You could be a bad role model, a weak role model, a courageous role model. He said, be yourself, and you never know who's going to look at you in the future and go, wow, copy him or follow his path or something like that. So anyway, I'm just going to put the jacket on for a few minutes, and I'll show you you'll see very clearly my 3 military medals, and I'll be able to tell you about them. And then you'll see the King Charles Medal. Basically, when I was 17 years old, I joined the 5-Field Regiment Artillery Reserves in the Bay Street Armories. And I was looking at these older guys with their medals. I thought, oh wow, I'd love to get a medal. And then I learned about a CD, a Canadian Declaration. It's a 12-year medal, which you'll see. It's the red one. And it has a younger version of Queen Elizabeth. From my age 17 to about 30, I was just desperate for that medal. I really wanted it. And when I finally got it, it was the best, biggest thing ever. But before that, 9/11 happened. And I had been through 3 or 4 years of training, and certainly 1 year of high readiness training. So with the 3 PPCLI infantry in Edmonton, I went to Kandahar in 2002. And that was Operation Enduring Freedom, the US-led coalition against terrorism. And that's another medal you'll see with the older queen on it, which is the first one I got. So now you put the 3 medals in a timeline. You have the younger queen, the older queen, and her son. And it's really kind of a cool story. Certainly when I show my kids who are now 14, 12, and 9, I show them, and they're starting to go, wow, really? So, yeah, it was really cool. So actually in Kandahar in 2002 was when the Queen Mother died. And we had heard about that. And I was walking down this long road toward our camp. There's this massive Canadian flag up there. And I was thinking about the Queen Mother. So you think about that. Canadian soldiers, infantry, front line, in combat. Get the news Queen Mother died. And our flag's up there at half-mast. And the US coalition, every other country is at full mast. It was a very cool, memorable moment to think about. Anyway, I'm sorry about this, but thank you for inviting me.
We appreciate it.
So One thing I can speak of, yes.
Some Kleenex.
No, I'm fine. I'm fine.
Your own wiping.
One thing I can think of, the reason I'm kind of tearing up in front of you is I'm now 50. It's my 35th anniversary in the park, and I have 3 kids. And I have retired from the Navy, and I have a second career now. And this time that I have, I'm home every day. I only work 8 hours, and I go home every day, and it's just amazing. And I love this area, and the connections, the people I meet. And I'm really enjoying living here in Greater Victoria, and volunteering, and now with the kids and their sports and scouting. I'm a scout leader. And, you know, it's the love of life in the community. So I did talk to a friend of mine before the ceremony, and he said, "You are going to wear your medals, are you?" I'm like, "Oh yeah, of course I am, of course I am." But there was a part of me that thought maybe I should be embarrassed not to wear my military medals to this event because most people won't have them. But the reason the medals are issued is to show them. So in a few minutes from now, when I put the jacket on, I'm not doing it in a braggadocious way by any means. It is to show you the nation's medals. And I'll explain what they were given for again. And I just want you to know that when I put this on, I'm not bragging. This is to show you what the government, you know, our crown, the system that we have. So this is the jacket I wore at Butchart Gardens. And I'll just put the jacket on. I'm not going to put the suit and tie on and everything, but so that's what it looks like. So this is the King Charles medal right here. And on the back side is a C, an R, and a 3. And it's Charles Rex III. Rex is Latin for king. So this is the 12-year medal that I mentioned earlier. It's called the Canadian Declaration, and it has the younger version of the Queen on it, because it was 1967 when it was issued. So it's 12 years, and then 10 years later you get the bar. So I have 24-year service, but that tells you I have at least 22. So this medal here is the Operation Enduring Freedom, which is a U.S. international-led coalition against terrorism. And so the medal, the way it went initially was the medal was issued to everybody. But if you were in harm's way, you received the Afghanistan bar. So if you were in Tampa, Florida, or in Dubai, you didn't get the bar, okay? But months and months later, when they realized that Enduring Freedom was Air Force and Navy, okay, so when I did a Navy trip in 2008 on Protector, I got this second bar here with the maple leaf on it. So that the second bar tells you I've been awarded the medal twice. Now in 2004, when I went to Kabul, Afghanistan, we were at the capital of Afghanistan is named Kabul, and there was an embassy and a university, and we were doing international security assistance. And so Canada developed a four-sided campaign star. And it's ISAF, International Security Assistance Force. And that was kind of about for 4 years, and then that faded out. And Operation Enduring Freedom ultimately ended after 12 years. So this medal is no longer awarded. So the way it goes is that when I get these remounted, the King Charles medal will go in the middle here, between the CD and the star. It's just that the way that they're lined up. And yeah. So that's the medal. So afterwards, everyone please come up and flip this over, and you'll see this CR3 on the back side. Yeah.
Tell them who some of the other people were they got.
Oh, well, I can't remember the names. I just, right now, I can't remember any names. But what had happened was there was 25 of us, and everyone had one nominee and one guest. And so I got there, and there was about 10 people in the room, and I kind of shook hands and chatted with everybody, and ultimately I sat down and looked at the program. And I sat down just to rest for a moment, and I'm flipping through this book. I'm like, what? Robert Bateman? I'm like, flip the page. What? Lorna Crozier? And I'm flipping through the page, and there's some distinguished people. I'm like, whoa. And I actually felt like I didn't belong there, because that was, quite a place to find myself in. But I quickly realized that everybody was there for different reasons, for different contributions at different stages in their life, for different whatever, so that was all good. And we got to have a champagne ceremony afterwards. And my guest was Walking with Bruce. So Bruce Brown was there, and he took a little video of me for about 10 seconds. And so here I am in the champagne reception, these tall flutes of champagne, like dressed up like really nice with a tie, and in this room mingling and jingling with all these other people. And it was really cool. It went on for like an hour. And yeah. Anyway, thank you very much for this. Thanks for listening. And I really, thank you. It was nice to come. Yeah. Right on.
Questions?
I was not able to make the walk that you did through the park, and I know that there was probably a lot more that would have loved to go. Would you do that again for us?
Oh yeah. Well, eventually we'll do one for sure. Yeah.
Okay.
That was a good time. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Anybody else?
I just wanted to say on the walk through the park how much I appreciated it, because often you walk through a park and you read those historical signs, you know, and say, oh, that's nice, you know. But you put meaning to the sign when you told us that was the spot where they lived and this happened. So I sort of thought that you brought everything to life and it made it much more interesting. And I'm sure that you really would enjoy going on the park.
Yeah. Right on. Well, thank you, everybody. Appreciate it. Yeah.
Our next recipient is a dedicated volunteer who's done so much work in the John Dean Park of North Saanich. She's also a service veteran of the Canadian Armed Forces. He spent countless hours on documenting and chronicling the story of John Dean Park and BC Parks. Well, Jarrett Teague. Congratulations.